Okay, so we're up to Chelak Aleph Perak Yud in Orot HaKodesh in this video. That's what we're going to be talking about here. And this piece, again, all the pieces in Chelak Aleph here really connect a lot. So what we're really going to talk about, it's called Erech Milchemes Hadeos. It's the value of fighting against ideas, really, or against perceptions. In other words, there's a certain value to actually resisting ideas. And the meta structure behind this piece is really about our tendency to sort of not, like, when you think about people's capacity, as we discussed a little bit in the past already, to get fixated on aspects of their lives, particular moments, particular roles, like any idea which you have in your head, whether it's a specific idea in terms of the time, like a situational thing, like if you're attached to a certain situation that you're in, or if you're attached to a certain role that you play, or you're attached to a certain object in the world, a certain activity. These are all tendencies to fixate, and tendencies to fixate means that we don't want those things to change. We want everything to stay the same in that area. And for a lot of us, we accumulate a very large, quantity of fixations like that, where there's a lot of things that we do not want to see change in our context, in our personal lives and personal experiences. And every time that happens, so it obviously creates conflict, because by definition, the place that we live, everything is always changing. And that's really the only thing which is constant, is that change keeps happening, keeps coming always. So whatever you're fixated on a particular thing, so it prevents you from sort of realizing or seeing how that thing is still part of the process of change, and there will be some change in that thing. And so it's really, if you can kind of come into every situation and even take this same idea, the same light of change, and sort of shine it on all the things you're already doing, then you can kind of be a little bit more prepared mentally for unexpected things. And prepared mentally means that when an unexpected thing happens, when a change happens, it doesn't just like bang into you and now you don't know what to do because you're so attached to things being like this. Now you're getting shifted over to that. It kind of makes you flexible and able to really, what's called lahachil, to contain the new situation within the larger you. And that's a very that's a very powerful way of thinking, and it really comes from the Torah is supposed to train us to think that way, to realize that change is constant, and to basically look for the change, and to almost like train yourselves to crave the change, and to expect it, to expect the unexpected, to search for that which is going to be the next thing. And when you kind of come into it that way, so then you never get shocked or damaged by the impact when something else is moving faster than you in a particular part of your life, and instead of getting slammed by that, you actually you know how to take it. We call that also, it's like riding the waves. It's like surfing, basically. That's really what this is. And that's very tough, because in our marriages, in our relationships with our children, our relationships with our friendships, our bosses, things are a certain way, and we don't want to think about, well, what if tomorrow it's just different? What if tomorrow things are different? And what if tomorrow I did this or did that, or something like this happened in my life? And those things are scary for us, but anything which is in the portfolio of what could happen, so it's minimally, if you know you're scared of it, that's kind of like a flag, a red flag, a marker that tells you, in that area, I'm not big enough. I'm not holding that, because I'm not really accepting of the totality of reality as it could be. Not that it should be that way, but when you're able to make yourself open to those things, it means that now you're more shelling. You're able to include all of that. Minimally for yourself, it helps, because that means that then you're more a realist. You're more an MS-oriented person. That's the whole idea. We're trying to become more MS-oriented so we can see MS. So we can see the truth of reality and Hashem's presence and these things which are real, the intangibles and the tangibles, to actually be able to see those things. Instead of just talking about religion in a very distant way, you can actually experientially perceive truth around you. That's one of the big reasons why it's very important to do that. This is what you yearn for. We all are yearning for seeing reality as it is, and not just in some warped way. And even if those things never happen to you, even if you get you accept that these things could happen but they never happen, but that also makes you able to connect to others around you, because people who are around you will struggle with things that you don't have. But since you understand that this is all part of the portfolio of what could happen to human beings, so then you can relate to somebody else who has a different situation from you. And that's the key to Avas Chinam, to actually connecting to people, baselessly, just purely from a place of, you and I, we're part of the same graduating class of humanity. And you have experiences that I might not actually have, but I know that I could have them. And so that's a really like central or profound way of opening ourselves to deeper connections with others. And this is kind of like this piece describes the process of doing that. And this process really, another term for it is shviras hakelim, the breaking of the vessels, because every time you're attached to something, so let's imagine you have this size perspective about it, and then boom, a change happens, and then it suddenly gets shattered and expands, and then now it's full of holes, and you're going to spend all this time trying to figure out what is the new perspective. How do things work now that I know this new thing, that I now change my perspective to include a larger way of thinking? So that's called shviras hakelim in Kabbalah, and it happens all the time. It could happen for some people over a period of years in a trauma which they really struggle with, and then some people can have it happen in a few seconds where suddenly something happens and you have a paradigm shift and things just change dramatically in your mind. And it really just depends on each person's particular setup in terms of their kalim inside, their various tools they use to evaluate reality, and the particular quantities of each we call midos. And so it really just varies, excuse me, person to person. So here, this is really about that process of the breakage and to sort of learn to detect it and see that it happens, that those breaks, and then to value it. So that's erech milchemes hadeos. It's the value of the war, of the battle of perception, which is, again, when you have your fixated way of seeing things and the new way, and the impact, there's a war that goes on and it shatters what happened, and then you slowly learn to kind of put it back together, and that's a process that we need to basically, if you value it, if you see how central it is to your existence, then you can really, you can look for it, you can actually create it. And that's really also what the word yisurin means. Yisurin means things that move you, like lasur means to change direction. So things that impact you, that change, that expand you, that make you now shift. So you can either have yisurin happen to you, or you can create a life in which you're constantly on the move, constantly expanding your understanding of yourself and others in these ways, shattering previously held conceptions of yourself and other people in Hashem. If you do that actively, then you'll never have yisurin, or you'll experience what's called yisurin shel ahava, which means things that move you in a way that now makes you more connected, which is exactly what we just described. That is the meaning of the Gemara in Brachos, which discusses yisurin shel ahava, when it's just purely proactively trying to shift your perspective to grow and grow and grow, purely for the sake of having a more accurate understanding of yourself and others in reality, which basically is what we mean by connection, because connection is predicated on I know what you are and what I am, and now we can actually meet instead of just each of us being missing each other because we don't really see each other as we each are. So let's read a little bit. There are perceptions that they must, according to the nature of a person, they will cause, through the spread of these ideas or perspectives, todos mazikos, all kinds of damage, like offspring of damage inside of the person. Even though these ideas are very, very positive or effective or efficient, they're good ideas, good perspectives. They're real, they're true. Through this, in the nature of the particular person, the person's internal setup will be caused by this, to sort of like fight against the existence of these ideas, to sort of like to contradict them, to go against them. So he should not get damaged. It's again, like, to use our same examples, if a person suddenly finds out that they have a disease, or they suddenly find out that there's something about the way they understood their lives is very different than what they thought. Their relationship with a loved one, suddenly there's a revelation that someone they love is, let's a random example, suddenly they find out that they're actually addicted to drugs. So these types of things it's something which is, and you also have with Torah ideas, where suddenly you get exposed to, wait, God is not a guy in the sky? Like, I don't even know what to think about that. Like, what does that even mean? Ideas that you kind of like, at first, you can't really grasp them because they're so different than what you thought, that you almost intrinsically fight against them, and that can't be true. And again, like, you might not even realize where you're fighting inside of yourself. It could be that you're overtly fighting. No, that can't be the truth. It could be that it's an overt fight for a year. No, I cannot accept they're doing drugs. Or it could be that it's a 10-second fight where, like, in the first 10 seconds you're like in shock. You're like, I can't handle that, and then you learn to accept it. So that's what we do. We react by fighting. That's because it's one versus the other. The battle can lengthen, and it will lengthen until a person is able to kind of like extract a greater gevura, the ability again to hold this. Gevura means to kind of like to hold something together, and it's a longer discussion what the word gevura means and how that works in general. But here, that's what he's saying: to hold together from like a deeper place. You can kind of you can wrap your mind around this bigger construct. V'az margishu she'emdaso lo tifachei klal. Now he'll feel like his position is that he's not scared at all. It's like now you kind of accepted it. You wrap your mind around it, and now you're not worried about it anymore. And that strength to accept it actually comes through the fight itself. In other words, by your struggle to accept is what actually basically gives you the power ultimately to hold the new idea. So that just as an analogy, let's when you're working out, it's exactly the same type of structure, because when you work out, so you're doing bench pressing, let's say, and it's very, very heavy, and you're going against the weight. It's pushing against it, you're pushing against it, and it tears your muscles open, and now you have these, this torn muscle fibers, and then the body will basically repair them by creating more and stronger muscle fibers to kind of like to deepen the power of the muscle, because it now thinks, I need to handle this heavier contradiction, and I have to be able to hold this and contain it. So and then there's no contradiction anymore, because after you have your arms are able to and your chest are able to deal with that weight, you're not fighting against that weight anymore. That now you and that weight are able to do it just fine, because your muscles are acclimated to that. And then you have to add a new level of weight, but that new level of weight will be a higher level, a more a heavier weight than the previous weight. So all that is going to be exactly relevant to this analogy. Yeah, so the power that you get to actually accept this new perspective comes from that fight. Because that you learn to really value the battle itself, because the battle is really what gives you that power, and it's true physically, and it's true psychologically, it's true emotionally, it's true perceptually. All these things work the same way. When we first have to battle against the new thing, and then we can include it. And he will know how much he'd be lacking if he wouldn't have actually battled against this damaging spread of this new idea. He has like a deeper life of control, of holding things together. And he accepts now the ideas that he was originally fighting against their spread. So and as you do that, that's what we call growth. It's greater awareness. You're basically deepening and expanding your perception, and it could also, and on the body level also, there's a deepening strength and growth of the body. All expansion and growth works this way. It's the battle of spreading beyond where you currently are to now include more. And for the reasons we already stated in the introduction to this video, so we just said earlier, that is our tendency is to fixate and not spread, and so that's why we have to train ourselves, even just to accept the idea of change is an example of this. If I say change is constant, so you're like, well, and I'm also like, well, change is constant, but like not always. I kind of want to just rest now, or I don't want the world to just keep going. But it's always doing that. It's a constant. You have to kind of wrap your mind around that, and the battle to do that is the same battle. But just as a person kind of expands and now has a bigger perspective, so now the ideas themselves now are kind of they also become bigger, just like with the heavier weights on the bench press. And those ideas themselves, even though they might look like those are the ideas that you struggled with earlier, Hashem, the God is not a guy in the sky. So that's like, I can tell it to you now. So you're saying, wow, okay, and it takes you a while to kind of wrap your head around what that means. Now, then what happens when we talk about the next level? What exactly is Hashem? And like, how do we talk about that? And what terms can we use? And what analogies can we use to really understand what that is? And each of those things is the same exact issue, but it's bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. But it's the same issue. So that's what we're saying is that it's the same. It looks like it's the same barbell with weights on the end, but like they're just different weights each time. So even though it looks like they're the same deos that you fought against them before, they're actually new. It's different. Just in terms of the external like characteristics, they look similar to each other. But the inner value, or the inner reality or meaning of these things, they're actually very separate and very different. Just like the separation between Kodesh and Chol, which we have to define. We're not going to do that right now. And light and dark. And then that which you separate yourself from the idea initially, you find that you rightfully fought against the idea initially. And that's which you now bring the ideas closer to you after you've expanded your consciousness, and now you can accept the ideas. So now you also know you're right to bring them closer. In other words, you're right in both places. In other words, what this is really saying is that it's actually the right thing to do to resist a new idea. And I don't say the right thing to do, like you should always do that. it's important to realize this is how it works. This is what process means for human beings in the state of mind that we currently live, which we call Olam Hazeh. The concept of process is inherently going to have stages of resistance and then acceptance. And so when you realize that, especially let's say if you're teaching somebody else something, you're telling somebody else something about yourself or sharing something with someone, when you realize that, it's so easy to have patience then, because instead of being like, why don't you get this? You don't understand? Like, it's so obvious, but it's just obvious to you because you already got your mind around it. They're still at the phase where they're trying to get their head to open so they can now grasp that. And then when you realize that, so you can patiently wait while you see their mind struggling. And you can remember, wait, I also go through that exact same process all the time. Just with this idea, I already did it and they haven't. So that's why now it's easier for me to understand. And specifically the ideas that are pushed away, that then come back and appear to us more fully, that's where we really find the Tal Chaim, like the dew of life, Eitan v'kadosh ma'od, that's very powerful, because that's, again, just like exercising, and just like idea expansion, and all these examples, that's how we really feel like we got somewhere. So I'll just end off with an example. I was once sitting next to a rabbi, and we were watching a group of our students. They were all singing. And they were singing a song which you're not really supposed to sing for few different reasons, halachically, or at least some people think you shouldn't sing it. So basically, the rabbi said to me, "What? How come these kids don't know that they're not supposed to sing that song? I mean, I know that, and you know that everyone knows that, and I knew that when I was their age." So I said, well, the question is kind of silly. It's kind of like, this is what I said to him. I said, the question is a little silly because to ask the question of how could they not know doesn't really tell us anything. We see they don't know. And so that means that in terms of the process of knowledge of that idea, so they never went through the process for that idea. So you can argue with that and you can say, well, it's not right, they don't know. That might be true, but it doesn't really mean anything to say that in terms of any reality orientation. The fact is that they're just, and it's very similar to the analogy of, let's say, when you have older people that say, young people these days, they just don't get it, or they're just so different, or old people these days, they just don't get it. They don't know what it's like. All those types of phrases, people who like, it has to do also with sexual examples and any labels. That person, those types of people, they just don't get it. These people don't get it. The whole idea of other people not getting it simply means that they have simply not gone through a process that allows them to include that idea that you have already gone through. And so just kind of looking at them over there and saying they don't get it, so now you're actually doing the same thing. You're essentially externalizing them. You're saying, I don't get them, and I'm actually looking at them as like, this is impossible. This is an idea which I can't wrap my head around, that someone else could not know that type of thing that I know. I can't wrap my head around that. So then you're actually exactly the same way that they don't get what you think, and they don't agree with you. You're now doing exactly the same things perceptually as what you're seeing them do. And the only way to really change the cycle of that dynamic is to really learn to say, wait, this is a process dynamic. That person has to figure it out themselves, or with my help. I have to learn to also see that they're going through that process. And that's really what brings us all together and makes us closer, because then we actually can connect to each other on a real level instead of being like, why doesn't that person just get it? Or how come I don't get it? And like they say about me that I don't get it. All those things are just, we're just not all in the same place. We haven't all gone through the same process for all of these things. So that's basically the idea of this, and that is Perek Yud.